from the school district perspective, a whole lot of tonight's good news report will be really an update on what the school district is doing. As you know, we continue to be in a remote learning situation in the school district. We will be in that mode for the remainder of the year. A couple of highlights tonight is that I will inform the board that I will not be recommending that we make up any time. You might recall that the first 3 days of the COVID virus, I had mentioned we should just look at this like we would a weather-related absence. But the fact that that has extended essentially from March 13th through the end of the year, I don't see the makeup of those days as adding any value to our school year. And also prior to that, we had missed 1 day in January due to a snowstorm. It'll be my recommendation that we do not make that date up either. That's different than what we usually do in the Sioux Falls School District. Usually if we miss a day, we make it up. And I'm not worried about that setting any precedent because I just think we're in a peculiar time, and the time that we're in does not call for the makeup of 1 to 4 days. It just doesn't make sense to me. So that will be one thing that we'll be covering tonight. I'll also be covering some statistics tonight on remote learning and what's the engagement of our students. And we have a percentage, I'll share it tonight, that talks about our students and how many of our students are actively learning. I'll set out a definition for what actively learning means, and then look at week-over-week statistics and how we're engaging our students.
Russo, Keller Radio News.
Has joined.
Good afternoon, Mark, and welcome to the conference. Yeah. So those will be a couple of things that we'll go over tonight, and then of course we'll have our math curriculum report and our workforce development and career exposure report. So with that, I'll just pause and ask for any questions that you might have on how things are going in response to the coronavirus or on any reports that we have planned for this evening.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Superintendent. So just to be clear, the last day of school will remain the same, correct? May 20th?
I missed what part of you cut out there for a second, Shelley.
The last day of school is expected to remain the same, it sounds like, then?
Yes. Yes, and you know what? I'm glad you set a date, and I can't confirm that because I don't remember what the last day of school was, but it's in the May 20s, and whatever the last day of school was scheduled to be for students, that will be the day that I continue to recommend to the board as being the last day for students. And then I believe there was one more day for staff, and that will be the last day that I recommend for staff as well.
Okay. Superintendent, you mentioned you're going to talk about the percentage of students that are actively learning. Could you share that now a little bit, or talk about the statistics? And
yep, very high level. I will, Ray. So when we started remote learning, we thought, okay, we're going to start remote learning, and it was like, well, what does that mean, and how does that look, and how do we know that teachers are teaching? How do we know that students are actively engaged in that learning? And so we tried to put some metrics together. First of all, we put a definition together of what actively learning means, and I'll share that tonight. And I'm not trying to be coy on that. If I can find it here, I'll share it with you now. But because there's a specific definition that we've attached to that, and I'm looking for it as we speak. Let me just find it. And I can't find it right now. So I'll share that. I'll share that tonight. But really, it's like you might suspect, students who have turned a product back in, a lesson back in, students who have, we know have been online, those sorts of things would be at least part of what we would talk about as being meeting the definition of active learning. And then the other thing is, well, how do we get that data and get it at the building level, and then how do we get that data and get it at the district level? So we put together some metrics fairly quickly in the last few weeks as to what that looks like. And I would tell you that currently at the elementary level, with all of our schools reporting, we have 86% of our students that we would consider to be actively learning. At the middle schools, we would have 85% of our students to be who would be what we consider to be actively learning. At the high school, and this was a surprise to me, we would have what we would consider to be 93% of our students actively learning. And at our specialty schools, we would have 80% of our students to be what we would consider actively learning. So I'll talk a little bit more tonight about what that means. And this data came to me this morning, so I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm trying to figure out why would our high school students have a greater degree of active learning than our middle schools or than our elementary schools. And I have a theory. I don't have any evidence to back this up. I have a theory that more of our high school students can be independent in their learning, or at least more independent in their learning than their younger colleagues. And also access might be a little better for our older learners than our younger learners. So also at the high school level, when you get a grade and you get a credit and that credit counts towards graduation, I think the stakes are a little higher than they are at the middle school level or the elementary level. So it's interesting that to see the statistics that we see there. And I don't know that the statistics are all that different necessarily than what we might see from an attendance perspective. So I'm actually quite pleased, although I don't really have anything to compare them to. So we'll track that week over week to make sure that the students who are actively learning stays a number that's a robust number and one that we're pleased with as a school district. So Ray, that's more than I planned to say. How
no.
does that help fill in some gaps?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Dr. Maher, any firmer plans yet on graduations, what you're planning to do with graduations? And also a separate question, maybe it's too early, any idea of the impact of what we're going through on the beginning of the new school year?
Yeah, two really good questions. I don't have an answer for either one of them, Mark, but two really good questions nonetheless. Let me talk about both of them, though. Number one, in terms of graduation, might be one of the more important decisions that I have yet to make, at least from an emotional standpoint and an impact standpoint. We have several parents who have weighed in, several students who have weighed in, and so what we've done is we put a process together to try to determine what's our best option for graduating our seniors. The first thing I would say is we haven't abandoned the end of May ceremony as an option yet. Now, I'm not naive enough to realize that hope gets dimmer by the day.
Has joined.
I think before too long we're going to need to make a decision on what that is. So that's number one. Number two, just last week we began engaging seniors in the class of 2020 to ask them what their thoughts are. I have a student advisory group. I pulled the seniors in that group together and said, what do you think? And what was interesting was I got kind of their knee-jerk reaction, but as the week wore on, they started talking to their friends, and their friends started talking to their friends. And what I heard back really was, we'd like to have a graduation, even if it's not in May, and we'd like it to be face-to-face. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to expand that listening, and we've got some meetings set up and some that we are setting up with each of our high schools in the school district, where myself and the high school principal will be meeting with students who are part of the student council to get their impression of what should graduation look like. Our first goal is to have a face-to-face ceremony, and if we can do that, we will do that. But then the other piece of that conversation is, what will we do if we can't have that face-to-face ceremony? And so we're that's kind of where we are today. If not in May, then when? And at what point in time does it cease being an option to have that face-to-face, ceremony? And I don't know the answers to those questions yet. So those are the questions that we're weighing on. The other piece of information that we are going to get back is, prior to the end of this week, all seniors in the class of 2020 will get a survey from the school district asking them to fill that out and provide that back to us in terms of information. And we'll act on the information that we get from the students we talk to. So we'll have a nice story that we get from those 50 or 60 students. And then beyond that, we'll have some data from a survey that we can try to marry to that story and then see where we go from there. We won't have an answer by the end of this week, but we'll have more information to help us with the decision by the end of this week.
So you got a survey going of high school seniors, I guess most of them or all of them, asking their feedback on what they would want. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there will be several pieces to that survey. Part of it will be, if we can't have it in May, would you still want a face-to-face in June or something like that? Quite frankly, we're constructing that survey as I speak to you. So we'll be putting that together here within the next 2 days. Hopefully by Wednesday that survey goes out and we get that information back by the end of the week.
And you mentioned 50 to 60 students. Is that part of the student advisory group that you were talking to, or? No,
that's what I've asked. What I've asked the principals to do is put together a group of at least 10 students from their school. So you've got Washington, Roosevelt, Lincoln, and New Tech High School, where we'll be pulling together at least 10. And one of those principals already has said, "Can I bring in more than 10?" And the answer was yes. So that's why I say 50 to 60. I suspect that we'll be with. And then my student advisory group is a group of 16 students, 4 from each one of the conventional high schools and specialty school and New Tech High School as well.
I'm curious if you're getting any sense of the fall start of school.
The other piece was, what about the fall? So our calendar is set to be on the board agenda here, the last meeting in April, so 2 weeks from tonight. And that calendar will be somewhat like this year's calendar was. I forget the exact date, but an August 20-something start date, which is now, I will say, a typical start date for our school year. And I would anticipate that our board will probably approve that in 2 weeks. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I don't believe there's any controversy with that. Had the coronavirus not come to be a reality in all of our life right now. The other piece of that, I would say, is we really don't know that coming back August 20-something will be an acceptable date for us to come back. So we are considering what do later options look like rather than that typical August 20-something start, or do we look at beginning the next school year in a remote learning situation? And I think all of those things are options right now, given the unknown that we have. I sure hope that by August 20-something, we're ready to go as normal, but who knows?
Dr. Moss, can you speak to how this ever-evolving situation with the virus has maybe affected redistricting as well as the budget process. Last spoke about it, you were hoping that the redistricting process would still be complete by the end of June, but is that still kind of the planned time frame?
Yep. By redistricting, you mean redoing the boundaries within the school system, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I would tell you that we are looking right now at the end of last week and now the beginning of this week, we are looking at how do we move forward with that conversation of redoing boundaries. That is something that I still intend to complete before I leave, and my last day is June 30th. So I would also tell you that the only way I think we can continue to move forward is to make sure that we have available a number of opportunities for input from our community. So we will still be looking at moving that forward and trying to figure out how does that look in the social distancing arena that we now live in. And we're looking at 5 opportunities for input, just like we had before, and actually having a culminating meeting of the task force. I'm not ready to give you the dates for those meetings because, quite frankly, I don't know them yet. But we are, Shelley, we are right now trying to put that all back together so that our board still gets that information and can act on that information yet in June. So that's our goal on the boundaries. In regards to the budget, I would tell you that we really felt like we were in terrific shape with the budget, and the 2% that we were going to get from the state had us really in a good spot in terms of moving forward with programming for next year, moving forward with salaries for next year, which, as you know, are about 85% of our budget, and with staffing for next year. Now, the governor hasn't said that the appropriation will be changed, but I think that it will be, given the fact that the legislature will reconvene this June, I believe. I tell people in our office, the legislature doesn't get back together to add money to the budget. So we fully expect that there will have to be some adjustment to the budget, given the adjustment to how revenue is coming into the state. So, and we won't know that till June, and quite frankly, the governor won't know that until June. So we trust that the governor will look at that. We trust that the appropriations will be done in a manner that best fits the needs of our state, and as a school district, we'll adapt and adjust once we have that information. The way it's impacted us in terms of putting the budget together, quite frankly, I think we had most of that budget pretty well finalized at this point. With us going back and revisiting it, we've put a hold on hires that would be new positions in the district, not new hires. So if somebody leaves an algebra position at a high school, we're still going to hire that position and put that back. So I don't mean somebody that would be new to the district, but I mean a position that we were going to add for next year. We have frozen those until we know what our budget situation is going to look like. So we're preparing for a budget cut, at least a lower allotment than the 2% that we thought we were going to get. So there's a lot to that, and I may be saying more than I need to, and might be confusing the issue. But yeah, there are a lot of things there that we're going to have to go back and revisit.
Thank you.
At the same time, you're looking to take bids for some projects that are scheduled to happen when the traditional school year is out. Do you expect a lot of bidding on that, and any concerns that construction can actually happen over the summer?
Yeah, I have less concern now than I did when I thought we might come back May 1st, and who knew if we were going to make up time and not make up time. I would tell you that as we speak today, our construction projects are still on time. They're still on budget. We still anticipate a competitive bidding environment. You know, I think when you look at our economy right now, the bidding environment might be one that might be advantageous right now. So I don't see that being a problem right now. The only concern that I would have is that workforce stays healthy, and as long as that happens, I see that the process continues to be on time and on budget. That's one piece of good news, I think, Ray.
If no one has anything else, I'll go back to the percentages of students reached, and you would say you still have some students to reach. You know, what's being done to maybe reach those that aren't actively learning yet?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. You know, the numbers are still new enough that I think we have to figure that out. How are we addressing that? You know, we've made great strides in our graduation rate in the last several years, and one of the ways that we've done that is we've figured out who was most in peril of not graduating, and then we figured out an individualized way of reaching out to that student. I suspect we're going to have to do something like that in this regard. So I don't know specifically how we'll do that, Ray. But you're right. I think you'd say when you said we would still have students we have to reach, I would look at our numbers and I would look at them in two different ways. One way I'd look at them and I would say those numbers actually look pretty darn good to me compared to what I feared we might see. But then if I was like the toy, the Etch-a-Sketch, and I just cleared my mind and had a blank slate and I looked at the numbers, I would say, gosh, we still have kids to reach. So on one hand, I'm very pleased with the number of kids we are reaching. On the other hand, I think we've got to get back to work and figure out how do we reach more than what we're reaching. And that's where I think we are now that these numbers have come in. Okay, any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right, folks, stay healthy, and we'll talk again soon.